What do you know about your ancestry?
I know my grandfather served in World War II.
A great-great-great-grandfather fought in the American Revolution.
My great-great-grandfather was General Lee.
Wow.
Out of Civil War.
What do you know about your ancestry?
What do I know about my ancestry?
Less than I would like.
I want to know more.
What do you know about your ancestry?
It's really interesting because I'm actually trying to go through that now.
I'm fortunate to have a mother who has been researching.
And my father has done ancestral research.
I have an auntie that studies our ancestry.
We have big family reunions. We always dig deep.
I hear bits and pieces.
What was told to me.
My mother's side is from Jamaica.
Half Senegalese, half Congolese. Somewhere in there was some German.
Off the coast of Georgia, Cameroon,
Liberia,
Barbados,
Irish and Kazakhstani.
My last name is Scottish, but I am mostly West African.
Predominantly West Africa.
Do you speak other languages?
I would say, coming from the Bay Area, we speak heavy slang. For instance, we say like, man, that's boosie. And people are like, boosie? Like, what is boosie? That just means whack.
What do you know about your ancestry?
My origin, Nigeria.
What part of Nigeria?
I'm from Lagos.
My dad was born in the village of Issa Akiti in the northern part of Nigeria.
My mom is from Texas. What city? I don't know. Just cut that out.
I do know that blindness runs in our family and so does high blood pressure.
I have a great-grandmother who used to say, when I die, feed me to the dogs, y'all.
My dad was raised in Tennessee.
I did have a living great-grandparent when I was born.
My grandfather on my father's side was 72.
My father was born in 1894.
I actually just found out that my grandma had a tradition where instead of blessing the food, they would like cuss the food.
Like what?
Like, everybody in this room, your mom's a whore, everybody's pussy stink, and we're gonna eat some good food.
I come from a long line of nurses,
kings and queens,
musicians. My cousin was a Temptation.
Entrepreneurs.
Our grandfather, Orlandis Green, was a serial entrepreneur.
My dad's dad, last name was Monk. Charles Monk is a descendant of Thelonious Monk.
And my grandfather was the first black independent contractor in New Orleans.
First black doctor in West Virginia.
My great-grandfather was a shoemaker.
My grandma is Creole.
My dad is Creole. It's when you're largely French, black, and sometimes Native or Haitian as well.
My maternal grandfather's side, black, white, Native American.
My great-great-grandmother was Cherokee.
My great-grandmother is Native American.
I see it in the eyebrows.
Ain't they thick?
Yeah.
What do you know about your ancestry?
I know quite a bit. I'm a mixed black person, so white mom, black dad.
A lot of people feel very strange not knowing sometimes what my identity is.
Constantly having to explain who you are is a problem.
A friend of mine got me one of those ancestry things.
The ancestry.com.
But it was like underwhelming. The maps that they showed me on the DNA was just like, you're in the Philippines, you went from Africa, went to Alabama.
Do you think you'll take one of those DNA tests?
Nah.
Mother won't let us.
I don't want somebody knocking on my door like the Golden State Killer, like, hey, you're relative.
What do you know about your ancestry?
Not enough.
I don't really know too much about that.
It's very hazy.
I don't know that much.
Nothing.
I'm just black.
Grew up knowing like the family history of my mom, more so than my dad.
On my father's side, he wasn't particularly forthcoming with a lot of information.
My mom doesn't know who her dad is.
I know that we had people in Indiana.
Washington State.
I'm not too sure outside of the United States.
You know where we come from, that's gonna be hard to really pinpoint.
But just the reality of being black is that there's not always a good through line to really find your ancestry.
I am guilty of being very incurious, and I think that that's because maybe I just have an expectation of there's gonna be trauma.
I get to the point where we stop showing up on census records and start showing up on property records. What do you know about your ancestry?
Not a lot, because slavery.
We come from a history of people that have been violated everywhere in the world.
As much as I know about my family history, it dates back to the slave plantation in Virginia. The slave plantation where my great-grandmother came from is still like up and like being used as like an Airbnb.
My great-grandmother, who grew up on a plantation in Missouri, was raped by a white doctor. And so my grandmother is very fair. And my great-grandmother used to put tar in her hair so that she could keep the baby.
My great-grandmother, her two brothers were lynched. They never made it here. I know that I have a Welsh rapist ancestor.
My grandmother's mother, she had my grandmother who was a babe in arms and an older son who was about 2. And she had another daughter who was 6 years old. My great-grandmother had to make a decision. and she could take the 2 kids in her arms, but she had to leave that 6-year-old.
So I think it's those kinds of stories, the stories of trauma that are felt and that still exist in my family in a particular way.
What do you know about your ancestry?
I want to know more. When I ask my grandfather, he can be really emotional. So I try not to bring that up too much because I can see it takes a lot out of him.
I'm a person who doesn't talk about certain things if I know it's going to make me really emotional.
My grandmother, she was a sharecropper, and as she picked that cotton, she bought cement blocks one at a time to be able to build a home for her and her 14 children.
On my grandfather's father's side, we were able to trace some things back to slavery, and there's a slave fiddler, Jack Hughes, and naturally, he was a fiddler. He would play the fiddle, and that would be the sign for everybody else to kind of escape.
That's an incredible story. I love that story.
Some of my family members were of lighter complexion, and they were able to pass and move from the South to Poughkeepsie, New York.
My great-grandfather, his leg got caught in a bear trap. And so it wasn't the best time. But they got away, period.
What do you know about your ancestry?
On my mother's father's side, I've traced it all the way back to a little girl who was kidnapped and brought to America from Madagascar. And when she got here, they named her Phyllis. Same name I have.
One of my ancestors, she was known for being the best quilt maker in the county. Of course, her slave master would sell her quilts, but she wanted a quilt of her own. They would check the slaves before they left the big house every day to make sure they weren't taking anything with them. She would hide everything, like back here, needles and stuff. It took her a while just to sew her own quilt, and she hid it, and when she was freed, she took that quilt with her, and we still have that quilt in the family. It's called the gooseneck quilt.
I know the slave owner and plantation that my father's side of the family came from.
And where was that?
Wood County, Texas, from the plantation of Richard Macmillan. He was a junior. For some reason, they called him Little Dick.
What do you know about your ancestry?
Everything I need to know. As of who I am and where we come from, that sort of thing. We don't have the pleasure of knowing that.
I think our blood speaks to us. My blood speaks to me.
People who are very proud of themselves.
Strong, spirited.
And of course, being Black is a representation of the original people on the planet.
I don't know if this is true. I just feel as though I'm a descendant of the Maurice people of Northern Africa. They were a very elaborate, eccentric, very of-the-world people. And yeah, I just feel like I came from that tribe.
My great-grandmother raised me to be very open to my spirituality and to accept what's unseen.
Just through what I've been blessed with on the dance floor, like just to be like, wow, this movement flows through me like water. On a spiritual level, I definitely feel connections to the western part of the continent. I was told by a teacher one day, literally on the dance floor, like, we might not know exactly where we come from, but when we're ready, our ancestors find us.